Hello, good morning. John, are you ready?
Yeah, fine.
Fantastic. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. I do hope that you can hear me all right. And without further ado, thank you very much for attending this morning. I do hope that you will find this useful. I'll just introduce John Noakes, who is our partner development specialist and specializing in Windows from Amazon Web Services.
Thank you, Mark. Yep. Hello. It's a pleasure to be here, everybody, and thanks very much for giving us an hour of your time to listen to what we have to say to you this morning. And I'll be speaking in a little while after Mark's introduction. So thank you again.
So my name is Mark Jackson, account director at Perfect Image. I work in specifically in cloud and managed services, and here today to talk to you about the benefits of AWS, specifically for Microsoft workloads, of which there are many. So we'll take hopefully about 45 minutes to go through some slides here, and again, hopefully we'll try and keep it interesting so that it's useful for you guys to understand where we're going with this. But in terms of an agenda, there it is. A little bit from myself first, and then the majority of this is going to be done by John. We're very pleased to have with us. We've worked together over a number of years now and done some really good stuff, not just with Microsoft, but mostly around Microsoft workloads and AWS. So we'll go through the introductions. Obviously, we've just done Perfect Image and Amazon, a little bit about that, and then we'll get into the real body of the session around the cloud in AWS and Microsoft, and then some other considerations potentially that will come out from that. Plus, we'll talk about some case study stuff specifically with one of our customers that we've done some migration work with Amazon and Microsoft. And then hopefully in the Q&A from the web chat, if you do want to ask questions, please do so in the chat, and we will get to them as we get to the end of the session. So okay, if we just have a look at why Perfect Image in AWS. So we've been at this for quite a while in public cloud computing terms. It doesn't seem like a long time, but it actually is. We chose AWS because they were back then and still are, as far as we're concerned, the best public cloud services provider in terms of breadth, capability, flexibility, the services that they offer. They've been at it for longer than anybody else, and they really are still forging the path. I think that's probably evident in any of the reading that you may have done in the press and anywhere else as well. We have a capability that will allow any business to be helped by us effectively to build a managed service around an infrastructure in AWS. With Windows, with other systems, with other databases and other technologies as well. We can do that at scale, and also for smaller businesses as well. So we've got the flexibility around the whole thing. There are terms in here like well-architected framework and security best practices. That's because obviously we have a large amount of investment that's gone into training our staff, certifying our staff, and making sure that we're doing things in the way that AWS expect as an advanced consulting partner. And you can also see that we have public sector qualifications, and also very importantly in this specifically, what's called the Microsoft Workloads competency. That competency is a fairly rare thing out in the UK as it stands at the moment. There's not that many Microsoft competency partners, even worldwide, to be honest, as far as I understand. And it means that, again, we've passed some fairly rigorous credentials to be able to offer that as a specific service within the work that we do with AWS. As you can see there, we certainly have within our HQ a network operations center that will go down the route of monitoring, servicing those workloads, making sure that they're integrated into other on-prem or even other cloud workloads, so that we can make sure that things are up and running, and if things do potentially cause any issue, then we can be proactive in getting people back to where they need to be. That extends into support for applications and all sorts of other pieces of work that we can do as well through that network operations center. So we do offer a full service on this. We'll talk about this a little bit later on as well, but the cost-free modeling service, we have a number of different AWS and other tools that allow us to effectively provide you with a pretty accurate cost around the decision to move into the AWS cloud, and we'll go through that in a little bit more detail. Okay, so you know, just I guess a little bit of theory, really. So this is just a definition of cloud or public cloud, and I think that it definitely resonates in terms of the change that we've seen over the last few years, where businesses are starting to you know, very clearly adopt this method of computing. That's obviously been, you know, helped over the years by the introduction of much faster internet connections, of course, and then the building out of these service offerings. But really, quite a lot of that, as you can see in the statement there, you know, on demand, paying for what they use, bandwidth, it's all based on consumption. But really, what we're getting into the world of here is a consumption-based model of being able to deliver IT in a very flexible, very scalable, and very cost-effective way. And it's really changing the way that we consume IT, and we all know that. But I think when we get into the detail that John's going to provide shortly, then we can really see that. So that was just a sort of a brief introduction, if you like, really. Okay, so without further ado, it gives me great pleasure again to allow John to go through his slides here. So I will hand over to him now, and we'll go from there. John, over to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Mark. And hello, everybody, again. I hope you can hear me okay. Mark, can you just confirm that my mic is working okay?
Yeah, absolutely fine, John.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So a little bit more of an introduction from me. My name is John Noakes. Yeah, I'm not the Blue Peter guy, right? You probably, some of you might know that, but anyway. So yeah, I've been at AWS just over a year, and my job is I'm a partner development specialist, which means I work with Perfect Image as one of the AWS partners that specialize in Windows workloads on AWS. So my job is to help Perfect Image become deeply competent and do even more of what they're already doing in migrating and modernizing Microsoft workloads on AWS. And over the next 30 minutes or so, I'm going to walk you through our strategy, our direction, and some of the key benefits and advantages of looking at AWS as a very, very credible and cost-effective destination, cloud destination to run, manage, implement, deploy your Microsoft workloads. So, by the way, you will get copies of the slides. Perfect Image will send those out after the session. So, yeah, let's click into this and get started. So, one of the things that I wanted to start with is this is what we hear from our customers all around the world when it comes to Microsoft workloads, Windows workloads, and you can see that most of these questions, I guess some of you will have these questions on your mind right now, today. And we would encourage you to keep asking them. And that's why Perfect Image and ourselves at AWS are here to help you. But it's no coincidence, I suppose, that the question in the largest font here says, how does Microsoft licensing work on AWS? That's a big question. It's a complex subject, but it is a very important one, because when we're talking about cost reduction and productivity increase, then clearly always the subject of licensing will come up. And I will address it in this session, not in detail, because we don't have time for that, but I'll certainly talk about the core principles. So when we look at these questions, we get them a lot. And in fact, if anything, the questions are increasing as the attraction of moving to AWS continues. And when we look at the relevance of Microsoft workloads in the business today, we see big numbers. As you can see on the chart, all of these numbers are from external sources, IDC, Gartner, and some from TSO Logic, and actually a figure from Microsoft themselves. And you can see that I think every one of you who is on this call will be able to identify with the presence, the prevalence, the usage of Microsoft workloads in your business, whether that's Windows Server, whether you're running SQL Server or the applications that sit on top of that, then we all know that this subject is very relevant. And it's an area where AWS can provide significant advantage. And as we all know, and as you will know, many of you are already migrating to the cloud. Some of you have already done it, and you want to do more. So a lot of the emphasis on the assistance that Perfect Image and AWS can provide is helping you in that migration journey. So when we look at that and look at the kind of things that are on your mind, I rather like this chart because it summarizes for me pretty well some of the top competing priorities in your day-to-day business. And I guess you can all identify with all of these things on here, all of these 8 priorities. And you start to think to yourself, well, if there are 8 priorities, how do I prioritize the priorities? Which is the most important? It's a different answer for everyone. But I wouldn't mind betting that the area that I've colored in orange there, cost reduction, that is the lowest common denominator for all of this. Obviously, you want to do more with less. You want to make your money go further. You want to release capital into doing innovative and new things, especially in the economic climate and the pandemic we're in at the moment. We have to think about things in a different way. How do we use the technology? How do we get access to computing resources where we only pay for what we use when we use it? So when we look at these competing priorities, AWS have offerings and capability in all of these areas, but that's not what today's about. We haven't got time to go through all of that. But I think looking at reducing cost is a great place to start. And I'd just like to reiterate that AWS's pricing philosophy goes right to the very heart of that. So we have many, many ways in which we can help our customers do more with their money, if I can put it that way. The way we price our offerings, it's a high volume, low margin business. It's absolutely central to what Amazon do, to what AWS do. And when you see on the chart there 4 examples of how that pricing philosophy comes to life, not only paying for what you use, but when you look at our history and the number of reductions we've made in price over the years, it stands to reason that our core DNA continues to be driving down cost and increasing productivity for our customers. And the model that you choose is very variable. Use the right model for the right workload for the right state. And as you get bigger and as you do more, there's ample opportunity to save even more money. So for instance, when we look at how we price and how you can consume computing options with EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, then there are 4 different areas to consume that computing demand. On demand, where you're paying by the second without any long-term commitment. Secondly, you can make a commitment up front to have reserved instances, which gives you a significant discount off that on-demand price. And more recently, we've introduced savings plans, which give you some even greater discounts on reserved instances with more flexibility when you commit to use that compute in certain ways. And finally, spot instances, which give massive savings. So that's us putting out into the market spare capacity that we don't need, that you can buy and you can consume at very low price. And the trick here, of course, is to mix and match with that menu, which might sound a bit complex at first, but back to something that Mark said earlier about having that right-sized environment and using the tools that Perfect Image are able to use with ourselves to give you the best model. And what you find is when you start mixing and matching this cost optimization, that's the definition of optimization, isn't it? Use the right pricing model for the right scenario and change them over time. This is not something that's fixed in time. Or I've signed on the dotted line on day 1 and that's me committed for 3 years. It doesn't work like that. The opportunity for you to scale up and scale down, scale wider, scale deeper, turn things on, turn things off, is absolutely what the cloud's about, and it goes right to the very heart of AWS's proposition. We have a number of things that we believe set us apart from other organizations in the cloud. And you see some of them on the chart here. I'm not going to go through each of these, but right at the very heart of this is the footprint we have and the way in which we build and deliver our infrastructure. The principle of having availability zones within regions and points of presence in a content delivery network gives us that capability to not only scale globally, of course, but to give you the flexibility to do what you need to do. In terms of the services we have over 200 services in AWS these days. And there is no one that knows everything about all those 210 plus services. And that's where specialist resource such as Perfect Image come into play. Because in AWS, the breadth and depth of our offerings is so wide and so deep that the world is now moving towards specialist partners who are good at what they do. And whether that's in this case, Microsoft Workloads, you can have exactly the same conversation about VMware and SAP and Oracle and IoT and all the other wonderful things that we do. But that ecosystem that we have with thousands of partners around the world gives you the opportunity, in this instance, to work with Perfect Image, specifically on Microsoft Workloads. And the position that we hold in the world of cloud computing is very positively endorsed by external analysts such as Gartner, IDC, and others. So when we look at the use cases that we focus on for Microsoft workloads and Windows workloads, this chart summarizes the four main cases that we see. Numbers 1 and 2 on the left of the chart are more to do with migration, and numbers 3 and 4 on the right-hand side of the chart are to do with modernization. So looking at the migration area first, whether you are migrating Windows Server VMs into AWS and optimizing your SQL Server estate to run on EC2 or even better RDS, Relational Database Service, where we take care of some of the management of that SQL Server for you, there are ample opportunities to, whether you want to call it lift and shift or rehost, the opportunity there to bring those Microsoft environments into AWS is front and center of our strategy. And that's what Perfect Image have demonstrated over the last few years and continue to do, with great potential to help you and hold your hand as you do that. You might already be skilled in AWS and cloud technologies. That's fine as well. So the opportunities here to consolidate data center investments, to retire what we often call technical debt and make a more optimized pricing decision is absolutely at the top of our mind, to help you do more with less and concentrate on what you're good at and drive innovation and drive more business for your company. And that's where the shift into modernization becomes relevant, because when we talk about modernizing your applications or your database or your operating system environment, I'll talk about it more later, this is a really exciting area. And this is the area where we see a lot of growth, a lot of attention, where organizations have already migrated into AWS. And now that they're stable, they've got their feet wet, they understand how compute and database and networking and workloads run on AWS, they're now looking at, right, what can we do next? What's the next step? And very often, in Microsoft terms, for the Microsoft workloads, that next step is modernizing that environment that I've already got in the cloud. And when we look at how our customers are saving money and saving their opportunities on AWS for Microsoft workloads, you can see here, AWS is an organization that every time we make statements, so I say, well, how do customers save money and how do they save their capability on AWS? We always have backup data and proof points. It's no good making just bland statements saying we do this, we do that, without having evidence. And when you look at the kind of things that we do, we've been running Windows workloads for over 12 years. We were running Windows workloads in EC2 before Microsoft were running them in Azure. So we've got a lot of experience. And some of the numbers that you see here will hopefully back that statement up. When we look at our global infrastructure, the way we run our business, we now have 24 geographical regions around the world, and within those regions, we have availability zones. And we're announcing regions all the time, new capability in new parts of the world. And when you dig down into this, the key thing is that a geographic region in AWS contains availability zones, and those availability zones, there's typically 3 of them in each region. They are multiple sites with discrete data centers. Each of those data centers have redundant power and networking connectivity in that region. They have a high throughput, low latency, and all of the traffic between those availability zones is encrypted. They are usually less than 100 kilometers apart, and together those 2 or 3 availability zones form a region. So the principle of how we build our infrastructure for you to run your computing services on is very, very important, and it indicates a really strong differentiation with AWS versus other cloud providers. We are unique in the way that we build this, and because we've been doing it for so long, we have a good degree of capability. When we look at availability and downtime, it's clearly an important point. We compare very, very well against other cloud providers. And these figures you can see up to March this year tell the story. On the left-hand side, the downtime by provider, and on the right-hand side, the average length of that downtime. So we're very proud of that, and we'll continue to build very resilient, highly available, very secure cloud environments around the world. So I said I'd mention licensing briefly, and this is it really. So in terms of bringing Microsoft licenses or running the options that you have for Microsoft licensing in AWS, you have 2 primary options. You can buy license included instances from us, which is effectively a Microsoft SPLA model, or you can bring your own license to AWS. And if you bring your own license, there are various options for those licenses that have license mobility from Microsoft, or the default tenancy for license mobility that have software assurance. So we give our customers a lot of flexibility here. Again, it's a specialist subject. We have follow-on sessions, which Perfect Image can tell you about, specifically on Microsoft licensing in AWS. But for the purposes of today's webinar, I did want to just give you the high-level view on what's capable of being done to give you flexibility and choice in licensing. I make no apology for repeating the message about driving down that total cost of ownership. What we are seeing with our customers is, yes, we've been running Microsoft workloads for many years, of course. It's been used for many years for all the right reasons, but we're continually looking to drive down cost and do more with it. So the investments that customers have made in perpetual licensing and using bring your own license opportunities gives you significant cost savings. The value that we provide with that spreads across a number of areas. We have something in AWS which Perfect Image are capable of delivering for you called an optimization and licensing assessment. That is a set of tools that we can deploy into your estate that then go and work out and look at your compute, networking, database optimization, resource optimization, and give you a right-sized business case to have that environment moved into AWS. We have a tool called AWS License Manager, which is free of charge. Every AWS customer has access to this, and it will look at all of your licensing from any platform. It's not just Microsoft. So if you've got Oracle, SAP, whatever it is you've got, the License Manager will look at those licenses, who's using them, how are they being utilized, can you redeploy licenses to other environments, etc. The option to use dedicated hosts drives down cost. And if you're bringing your own license and accessing things like saving plans and reserved instances, these are all opportunities to reduce total cost of ownership. I mentioned the OLA, the optimization and licensing assessment. Typically, we see massive savings when an OLA is deployed, and the results of that OLA give you a right-sized environment to say, if I take my existing on-prem environment and I move it to AWS, because I've done it in a structured, formal, methodical way, following a business model from AWS, I will get a right-sized cost savings. And you can see some numbers on the chart here coming from our OLAs that we deploy all around the world. It's a really critical point, as this customer case study shows you. So this organization ran an OLA, an optimization licensing assessment with us. And what the tool found, look at this, their average CPU utilization was less than 5% across their estate. 35% RAM usage and 45% of their storage being used. So straight away, you're thinking, crikey, I'm paying for all this stuff, and I probably don't need to be. So we did a direct match of the on-premise environment, and it was $21 million of their on-premise environment. So when that was optimized, that was reduced to $7 million with 3-year reserved instances and combining those licensing strategies I talked about earlier. And that means that this customer, they had 2,300 SQL Server Enterprise licenses and 1,300 enterprise cores. So they reduced their core dependency with a 44% reduction in license costs. So these models can really, really benefit a business case that shows you how to reduce spend. And Mark from Perfect Image will talk about an example of this, the customer case study, in a few moments. So when we talk about SQL Server, the opportunity to rehost, replatform, or refactor SQL Server on AWS is dramatic. If it's a lift and shift and you want to get that SQL Server into EC2, that's pretty straightforward. You can also replatform that by running it in RDS, Relational Database Service from Amazon. And that means you don't have as much overhead or management of SQL Server because we do that for you. When you then come to look at refactoring or modernizing that SQL environment, we have opportunities to take that SQL Server environment to things like Amazon Aurora, DynamoDB, Redshift. We have over 15 different native database options in AWS. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. But Amazon Aurora is the fastest growing service in AWS history. And when you look at Aurora as an opportunity to modernize that SQL environment, driving down that cost and driving up the performance is what it's all about. So having the opportunity to subscribe to a service from Amazon where that Aurora database service, which has been natively built on the cloud with 3 times the performance of a traditional on-prem database and 5 times lower cost. That is an amazing set of statistics and well worth investigating if that's of interest to you, and Perfect Image are well placed to talk about that. So the journeys that we see our customers on with Windows workloads are pretty straightforward. I'm sure some of you have seen a chart like this before. It's nice and simple, and I think that's the right way to look at it. But of course, there's lots of complexity behind it. We have a 4-stage process here where at first we're looking at assessing your environment. Perfect Image are well experienced in doing this. So that's things like the optimized licensing assessment. And then when the results of that come back and we develop a migration strategy for you, that's where the cost savings start to kick in, because we're going to optimize that environment for you using the right licenses, the right resources with that capability on AWS. And then ultimately, somewhere further down the road for some of you might be ready to do it now, to look at that modernized strategy. The key point here is in each of these 4 areas, we have funding programs, which Mark will refer to later, where we can help Perfect Image. They get access to funding from AWS to help you, our customers, make this journey at the most efficient cost possible. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But when we look at the migration services we have, I mentioned earlier we have over 200 services these days, and you can see some of them on this chart. So whether you're at the assessment level, the readiness level, actually doing the migration and then optimizing it, we have a range of tools and services to help with that migration capability. And without having this granularity and this deep dive capability to use the right service for the right reason, there is not a one-size-fits-all. And that's where Perfect Image come in, because Perfect Image's experience of these tools gives you the safety and the knowledge and the peace of mind that we are using the right AWS toolset for the right purpose. When we talk about modernization, I think this chart summarizes it in quite a useful way. I hope you'll agree. So with Windows modernization, we have what we call pathways that bring that Windows environment into a new world, shall I say. With a Windows on-premise environment or in another cloud or maybe already in AWS, we are looking to modernize that to get that environment onto Linux, off Windows onto Linux. For SQL Server, moving SQL Server on Windows, on-prem, moving that to SQL Server on Linux, that drives down the cost, or even better, getting rid of SQL Server altogether and moving to Amazon Aurora. At the application layer, a .NET Framework application, modernizing that to .NET Core, running that on Linux, gives you much more flexibility to embrace containers and serverless technologies with Lambda. And that's where you're moving into the whole DevOps and serverless environment. So whichever of these modernization paths may be of interest to you, again, Perfect Image are capable of advancing that conversation for you. But what we are seeing with our customers on Windows workloads is the level of interest and the POCs that customers are beginning to take on this modernization motion is very, very attractive. So we have a lot of examples starting to come through now where this modernization strategy for customers is overtaking, in some cases, the need in the first instance to migrate. In fact, I'm dealing with a couple of situations at the moment where a customer is taking the opportunity through the funding programs we have with our partners to migrate and modernize at the same time in an elongated POC that, I don't want to sit here and say you can do this over a weekend. Of course you can't. It takes time, it takes planning. But in terms of a pathway to follow, I hope this will be of interest to you, and that's something that we can follow up on as a result of this session today. So to bring this to a close and hand back to Mark, I want to finish with some examples of what our customers have done to migrate and modernize those Microsoft workloads and again drive down costs. Look at this from Info. Thousands of databases saving 75% on backup costs. These are real savings with real organizations, global in this case, that provide the evidence that back up what can be sometimes viewed as, it's pretty PowerPoint, but where's the real action? These are examples of real projects that have delivered benefit. This one from Hess, energy and utility company, I just love the comment they're making here. We haven't met a Windows workload that we can't run in AWS and run it better, including Windows servers with zero downtime. So these guys have moved 1,000 business critical applications, Windows applications to AWS in 3 months. 1,000 applications in 3 months. That is a really, really strong statement. So when we look at Dow Jones and what these guys have done, obviously we all know who Dow Jones are and the emphasis and the mission criticality of data for Dow Jones. That is their business, providing data on markets, etc. So they wanted to modernize that on-premise SQL environment to Aurora, driving down cost, moving much of the operational overhead, completely eliminating the need to manage storage, because Amazon Aurora does all that for you, freeing up the funds to do innovation. Such a great story, and one of many around the world where our customers are proving these benefits. 3 weeks ago, Gartner released their new Magic Quadrant for a new segment they call Cloud Infrastructure and Platform Services. This is an extension of their previous Magic Quadrant, which was Cloud Infrastructure. So this is the 10th consecutive year that Gartner have recognized AWS as a leader. We're very proud of that, and you can view the report on the AWS website. We can send you a link to that after the session. So in summary, when I look at the value of Microsoft workloads running in AWS, these 6 parameters here offer great opportunity for you. There's packed with evidence and statistics you see on the chart. I'm not going to read them all out, but you'll get the charts. So whichever element you're looking at, we will have a proof point, customer case studies, and partners such as Perfect Image that can help you dive deep on this and make that move to bring those Microsoft workloads to the AWS cloud. Before I hand back to Mark, I just want to reiterate something he said up front. In AWS, obviously, we have thousands of partners around the world, and we have a very deep and a very wide competency program for our partners. There are 26 different competencies in AWS that our partners can attain to demonstrate their capability, their specialism, and their deep dive ability to help customers. One of those 26 competencies is called the Microsoft Workload competency. And of all of those 26, we regularly get feedback from our partners that this is one of the most difficult competencies to achieve. We have a very high bar. And I'll just reiterate what Mark said earlier. Perfect Image have this competency, and that puts them in a very exclusive club, if I can put it that way. Very few partners have this ability. And the things they had to prove to us to get this is more than just a pretty badge in reception. And the reason I'm finishing on this point is because I hope it gives you the confidence, the capability, and the strength of knowledge to know that if Perfect Image are going to help you on this journey, then they have AWS behind them as a result of having this competency. So that brings my talk to a close. I think we're in good time there. And I'll pass back to you, Mark, if that's okay at that point.
Absolutely, yeah. Thanks, John. I hope you can hear me again, everyone.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, John. I really appreciate that, and I hope for those people that have been listening to that it's provided you with what can only be described as some very compelling evidence. And again, to reiterate a few things that John said, Amazon as a business, they do like to be evidence-based when they're talking about the successes that they've had and the offerings that they have. What's great about it is that it is evidentially backed up. Certainly, we will send you the link to the Gartner information as well, because that's really worth having a look at, just as a different view. So, okay, to move on then, really, the next part of this, really, following some of the case studies globally from AWS, is to talk about one of the case studies that we have ourselves with one of our customers. So we can talk about Bellway Homes. Hopefully we'll get the slide. There it is. Lovely. So Bellway are a really good customer for Perfect Image. We've worked with them for a number of years, and they've certainly gone on a journey. I mean, as you can see there, they started quite a while ago in Newcastle upon Tyne, and they now are very much a national business. They are a FTSE 250 company. They are currently the 5th largest house builder in the country, and a turnover of around £2.5 billion. So, not a small enterprise by any means. And as they've grown up through the use of technology over the last 25 years or so, they've very definitely embraced new and emerging technologies as they've happened. So, for us, what that meant is that when we started to look at the public cloud, and we chose AWS for all those great reasons that we did, and we started to get the competencies, then we started bringing Bellway on that journey as well with us. And for them, there were a number of drivers immediately that they wanted to explore to move to the cloud. So if we go to the next one, John. Which are these really, which is, this echoes a lot of the stuff that has just been mirrored in the benefits of Amazon, specifically around Microsoft, and we'll go into a bit more detail around that. But some obvious things like Windows operating systems for a business of that size and scale are not cheap. So if there's an option to reduce that, or to look at how to make that as efficient as possible regarding some of the things that John's mentioned, then that's very definitely on the agenda for the head of IT and all of the people that work there, and certainly for ourselves. Hosting costs, actually not having to guess capacity and go down the route of a pay-as-you-go model where possible, and then being able to optimize that licensing, as we've said, through optimization and licensing assessment, and then also through being able to look at the different costing models available, such as reserved instances, savings plans, and what have you. Again, all of this provides compelling evidence to move away from a traditional data center where possible and start to go down the route of AWS. Again, the ability for us to increase compute and storage capacity, almost infinitely, in fact, infinitely, and be able to do that in a way that's manageable. It's containerized. It's you have the ability to be able to fully manage that environment and be able to do it in such a way that provides a level of granularity that's really quite useful for the client. So again, that's the sort of thing that we're able to do. Flexibility, obvious, and then infrastructure support costs, the ability for us to be able to understand that environment, control that environment, not have to do things like bare metal patching, that sort of stuff. It really just starts to bring costs all the way down because of the nature of Amazon and the way that infrastructure actually works. The obvious stuff about technical debt, John's already mentioned. Getting rid of old kit is a really compelling argument. And then high availability and DR and backup. Well, again, John's already mentioned, the use case he was talking about with backups there. Again, same sort of thing. Disaster recovery and backups we'll see some mention of in a quote that we see later on. High availability, again, being able to have a flip over from one environment to another to make sure that things are up and running and continue to stay up and running within an SLA, which is obviously something that AWS is very capable of doing and building that environment in the right way. So it's certainly something that allows us to offer that sort of a service in a very efficient way. So those were the drivers. In terms of the design, obviously we went down the route of looking at an existing AWS environment that we'd started to build, and we continue to improve that environment. And we're in a position whereby we can, as workloads come along, as we're retiring old kit, as we're looking at new opportunities to put software that even we've written or software that exists in the Bellway estate into the AWS environment, and it just continues to improve and grow in a controlled way. Again, the high availability, as it says there, we have the ability to be able to make sure that should an area go down regionally, then we're in a position whereby we can effectively mitigate against that and have people almost instantaneously up and running, sometimes without even noticing that things have actually gone off. And that's evident sometimes if you look at some of the systems that we have running in the URL. You can see which region it's actually in, and we've done tests where using Citrix where we would flip it over from one to the other, and it's pretty impressive to see. Again, the existing MPLS connection that we had with Bellway, we extended that into AWS using the services that are available for that kind of connectivity. And then, as we're talking about Microsoft services here, one of the major things that we did was that we decided to put Exchange and the other Microsoft services that you see there actually into AWS rather than using any of Microsoft's more native offerings for email and Exchange. Yeah, the stages of this, obviously this has been in phases, as you can see. So there's a number of different phases to this, and this continues, but this just gives you an idea of where we started really and how we've moved on through this. So this is all working now in AWS. But things like in phase 2 there, the increase in required storage needed for Exchange due to the mailbox growth, that kind of stuff. It's just very easy to do when you know what you're doing with this kind of thing. And it offers a large amount of scalability and a large amount of efficiency because of the fact that you can use different storage tiers. You can have things archived very, very cheaply through AWS. obviously the security part of that is all controlled as well, in the same way that it is for all of the things that you need to see right now. It's all part of the same service, but there's a lot of granularity when you get under the hood that allows us to, again, going down the principles that John explained, continuously innovate, continuously make the services that we're offering as cheap as possible, but as reliable and as quality as possible, which is obviously massively important for all of us. So the last one, really, if we look at the last slide here, is just a quote. So this is from Sean Lally, who is the IT director at Bellway, and I'll let you guys just ingest that. But the benefits, as you can see, of what we've done so far, really very tangible stuff in terms of getting their environment into a place where they're feeling very confident about how they can now continue to do what they do as a business and grow. With that backbone and with that connectivity, with the ability for us to help them continue to work in that way. So a real, I think, good example specifically around Microsoft, specifically around the work that we can do at a business of that sort of size and scale. Obviously, we have a good few other businesses that are running on AWS, some large, some very small. But the point is really that we've got the skills. We certainly would like to help you do that. And one of the ways that we can help you do that certainly is to talk about licensing assessment, and then also start to get into, depending on the use case, as John mentioned, a discussion around what sort of funding is available. There are different funding streams. Obviously, there are funding streams for the Windows workloads. There are funding streams for other applications such as Oracle and other systems as well. And then one of the other things that John touched on, just to reiterate, and this is something that we have done with Bellway, is the optimization of an environment, getting away from expensive SQL Server based applications and migrating those SQL Server based applications, the database side of that, into one of AWS's native databases. Very, very interesting, and something that is very definitely, from a financial point of view, something we can talk about from a funding point of view with Amazon as well. So, yeah, if anybody is interested, certainly in any of that, then we'd love to hear it. But other than that, I think I'm done with this. I'd like to thank everybody, certainly thank John for the information today. I'm just having a quick look at Q&A. John, can you pop back on? We've actually just got a quick question just about a little bit more information, if possible, on savings plans.
Okay, yeah, I can send that through after the event. So, yeah, with savings plans, they were recently introduced, and that gives you the ability to make a commitment in a slightly different way to reserved instances, to be able to say, well, looking at my current projection of my business, I would project that over the next year, 2 years, 3 years, I'm going to be looking at this sort of resource allocation. And we take that into account and give you flexibility to change that. But I will send, as a follow-up, some more detailed information about savings plans. They're well worth looking into.
Fantastic. Okay, great. I think that's all the stuff we have. If anybody else has got any Q&A right now, then please type it in the bar. If not, then thank you for attending. We will be in touch with you afterwards. Yeah, I hope you found it interesting, and thanks very much.